So the average college student creates about 320 pounds of wasted paper a year. I could probably imagine that an architecture student creates about 3 to 5 times that amount. I mean, we've all seen those recycle bins stacked up in studio. Today, we're gonna be taking those used pieces of paper that are in the recycle bin, and we're gonna turn them into something that you can use for an architectural model or a piece of art. Do not recycle your paper, just upcycle it yourself. If you've never recycled your own paper before, or you're looking for some fresh new ideas, you're watching the perfect video. On this channel, we believe that sustainable practices are top priority for the design build process. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Here's everything you'll need. Scissors. Thumbtacks. A cup or a large bowl. A picture frame. I had one just sitting around the house, but you can pick up a used one from a thrift store. A screen. I cut this one out of an old window screen. A blender. A storage tub with no holes in it. And last but not least, used paper. Other things that you can use is glitter, flowers, cardboard, sand, confetti, newspaper, textiles, watercolor paint, and any object that's tiny and somewhat pliable. Let's start by gathering up our used papers. We want to begin cutting them up into small pieces. We're going to be blending them up, so the smaller you can cut them or tear them, the easier it will be for the blender. It'll also make a more consistent pulp in the end. I cut mine up into strips and then place them in a large mixing bowl so they don't get everywhere. Next, let's get out our blender and have some water ready on the side. Place your cut up pieces of paper into the blender little by little. You don't need to completely pack the blender, just use your best sense to determine how much paper your blender can handle. Add a little bit of water and start the blending process. I like to start with a little bit of paper and water and work my way up. You want your pulp to be very wet. If your pulp is looking a little dry, just add water. It's not a bad thing to have too much water, and it actually helps the paper to separate from its cellulose fibers. This is how you create paper pulp, which you can use for an almost infinite number of crafts. I'll leave a list in the description below of things that you can make with paper pulp. I went ahead and made 3 batches. One with just the paper, which I'll add watercoloring to, and I did another batch with flowers, and my final batch I made with cardboard. I poured the 3 batches into 3 separate mason jars and then moved on to creating the screen. I cut the screen out of an old window screen my buddy gave me. You can find these just about anywhere online for really cheap. Check Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. The way I created the paper today was definitely not your typical way. Traditionally, you would want to create a mold and decal, which is essentially 2 frames with the screen in the middle. Anyways, this method with the thumbtacks worked great for me about 2 out of 3 times. The 3rd time, I made a big mistake, but we can talk about that a little bit later. Fill your tub with enough water that it covers your frame by at least 1 inch. Mine covered it by 2 inches. This allowed the pulp to float over it freely. Dump your pulp into the tub with the water and place your screen frame inside the mixture. Slowly shift it back and forth until it looks like the pulp is covering it completely. Then, make it perfectly flat and slowly lift it up. You want to make sure you let this dry completely. This is where I messed up on my third try. I got impatient and I didn't let it dry. The mold and decal make it so you don't have to let the paper completely dry on the screen before you release it. Because I didn't use a proper mold and decal, this is what happened. I pretty much messed up this paper. In the end, you can probably just cut around it, but what I gotta say is, if you're gonna do this, make sure you completely let it dry, then release the paper. So if you let yours completely dry, you won't have to do this next step. Because mine was wet, I had to flip it around and lay it flat. I placed a large towel over it, and then I used this vase that I had laying around. I used a vase because I didn't want to create too much uneven pressure. If you have a wine bottle or a rolling pin, those will work perfect for this. Then, after I dried it as much as possible, I cleaned up the sides a little bit so it'll be easier to remove when it's done. Alright, give it some time, and there you have it. That's awesome. We've recycled our own paper, and we haven't had to rely on anyone else to deal with our waste. The next step would be to create something new out of it and give it a new life, like an architectural model or a piece of art. So you can actually use this paper that you've created in place of any paper that you would use in your models. Also, whatever you've cut up and put into your model can be used to represent your concept. So upcycling your paper waste was an amazing first step you took. And there's always so much that we can do to have a more environmentally conscious design. If you like the video, please like the video and consider subscribing if you want to see future content just like this. If you want to learn more about DIY sustainable projects, check out that playlist at the top there. Also, recently, I just went in my backyard and picked up some dirt and turned it into a rammed earth planter. You can see how I did that down there at the bottom. Thank you for watching. I hope to catch you in the next one.